opening remarks, and let me thank Brother Lambie and Brother Sherwin, and let me thank your listeners for being here with us again this evening. There's no doubt that there are a number of important other things that they could be doing, but again, it is a measure of the kind of resistance that we fortunately have. That there are persons who've dedicated at least 2 hours on a Tuesday evening to hear us speak about issues that relate to our body politic insofar as Dominica is concerned. Now, let me say this. Whether we are talking about freedom of speech, whether we are talking about freedom of assembly, whether we are talking about the proliferation of guns, whether we are talking about the alarming incidents of gun violence, the root cause or one of the main root causes is the same. And it is this: the root cause, or one of the main causes, is the contamination of the rule of law by political considerations. That is the root cause. And I say that because all the pontifications we hear about a new gun initiative, about giving police additional rights, it's all for naught. Because the root cause will remain. Enforcement will be governed by political bias and political affiliation. For example, if you have a gun in the House of Assembly, no one will notice in terms of law enforcement. But if you're a brother of our Prime Minister and you have you're in possession, legal possession of a gun, the police will find cause why they should take it from you. If a barrel of guns come into Dominica, the police will not take the most basic and elementary investigative procedure to arrange a sting where someone will come and pick it up, offering the police a lead as to who is the culprit or who are the culprits in terms of the importation of firearms. Rather, they will seize the barrel, and in so doing, their failure to conduct an elementary investigation calls into question how genuine they are in ridding Dominica of the scourge of gun violence. So that is basically where we are. The efforts being made are cosmetic. They are not sincere because, quite frankly, they do not eliminate the root of the problem, which is to say political contamination of the law enforcement apparatus in Dominica. As long as that persists, everything will be futile. We will speak about guns, and that initiative has only come about after the shooting of this fellow on the tourist ship. They have to save face. They have to give the impression to the powers that be regionally and internationally that they do not countenance that type of activity. But they do. The evidence is clear. Because after all, we have our own little SEALs and we have our own little snipers, and we boast about having our own SEALs and snipers. As long as the guns are in the possession of those who support this administration, everything is going to be all right. And that is the danger that we face. That is the danger that we face. Law enforcement is not being effective in a fashion free from bias, free from interference. It is done in one particular way: to turn the other cheek or turn a look elsewhere, when, quite frankly, those who are associated or affiliated with the administration give or create or have in their possession guns which have taken such a bad toll on Dominica. So let us be clear. All these pontifications and all these grandstanding and all these comments on Matt Peltier inviting the very persons who refuse to enforce the law in a political free bias fashion, they are the ones responsible to a significant degree for the proliferation of gun violence in Dominica. That's the bottom line. That's the sad reality. Unfortunately, Dominicans patriotic Dominicans understand that that is the plague, that is the cancer which is eating away at the body politic of our democracy in Dominica. But what about free speech? It suffers from the same malady. Gone are the days, Mr. G, when opposition parties in Dominica, whether the Freedom Party at one point, whether the UWP at another point, whether the Labour Party at another point, would hold massive public meetings at the old facility right on that street opposite where the Banque Française, RTS used to be Banque Française. That house is actually dilapidated now. It is a symbol of the destruction, as it were, of freedom of assembly and free speech in Dominica. Here's what our Constitution says regarding free speech. Section 10, subsection 1. Quote, except with his own consent, a person shall not be hindered in enjoyment of his freedom of expression, including freedom to hold opinions without interference, freedom to receive ideas and information, freedom to communicate ideas and information without interference, whether the communication to the public generally or to any person or class of persons, and freedom from interference with his correspondence. The court, in one Court of Appeal decision, going back to 1999, the OEES Court of Appeal, one of the judges, appellate judges, had this to say, quote, the right to freedom of speech in particular and all the other rights attendant to that right should be viewed from the same standpoint as the fresh air which we breathe. Every human being, wherever he is entitled to and has a right to breathe that fresh air unpolluted, which is essentially vital for the sustenance and the growth of a healthy body. So too, freedom of speech is essentially vital for the sustenance and growth of a healthy democracy. And that raises the question, is freedom of speech in Dominica as we speak? Or do people have that right or have that entitlement in the same degree as they have a right to breathe fresh air? The answer is not blown in the winds. The answer is that they do not. Take, for instance, the charade of March the 19th. Persons assembling in the vicinity of the House of Assembly to peacefully protest the so-called electoral reforms provisions which were going to be passed in the House of Assembly. A barrier is erected. There's a tug of war between police officers and some protesters. Note the word please, some. But during that tug of war, there was not even a firearm, for God's sakes, thank goodness. Not even a plastic bottle or water bottle was thrown. Not even a marshmallow was fired at any law officer. Nothing. No violence by those who assembled in a legitimate form of protest. But that gave the police the unfettered license to declare that there was a riot and to unleash the power of the state on these peaceful demonstrators. And when there was a press conference afterwards, note one thing, the police never showed any images of police officers beating a peaceful demonstrator while he lay defenseless on the ground. They never showed any images of another protester who was subsequently promoted, assaulting a journalist by trying to forcefully, without consent, take her camera. They never showed a police officer blatantly and flagrantly and egregiously firing stones at demonstrators. They clenched the record from the egregious acts of law enforcement agents. And then they call it a riot. But the state did not stop there. They charged 24 persons. Well, make it 25 because they recently charged Dr. Thompson Fontaine with participating in a riotous assembly. A riotous assembly. Now, let me ask you this. Can you think of any instance in the past, going back to the 60s, 70s, when members who were protesting the passage of legislation were charged with a riotous assembly? Not even what happened on May 29, 1979, in its aftermath. There was no such charge because it would be a bogus charge. Persons were exercising their democratic rights. The police cannot create a violent altercation and then claim that this was a riotous assembly. And there is no doubt in my mind that the courts will have much to say about this bogus exercise of state power. They did not seize not a gun. They did not seize not a catapult. They did not seize not an empty can of Coke or beer from any protester or any person who was there peacefully. Nothing of the kind. No weapon. Yet they framed this as a riotous assembly for one purpose: to stifle and silence the legitimate expression of free speech and freedom of assembly in Dominica. In many other places, they would say this is evidence of a fascist state. If hypothetically I was part of a motorcycle gang that support the political administration, and I block off Bath Road to a point where vehicles had to be diverted, they cannot go through, and the police do nothing to prevent a group of persons from denying motorists access through that main road. Well, what would you say? The answer is clear. They are jaundiced. They only view the whole question of law and order through the lens of political allegiance and political interference. I listened, Mr. G, to your radio station for a few hours the last couple of days, and much was said about the recruitment and the hiring of police officers today. And many police officers who retired called and bitterly expressed their opinion that it was not like the old days. There is not even a semblance of decency and integrity in law enforcement today. No one is even pretending, for God's sakes, that that is what's happening. The word on the street or among the ranks is clear. You violate the rights of anybody who is opposed to the administration, and you will receive a wonderful promotion. In Haiti, they call it the Tonton Macoute. In Grenada, they call it the Mongoose Gang. Because quite frankly, there is no pretense that the whole administration of justice is being done without fear and without favor. On the contrary, many of the higher or upper echelons of the force, they go out of their way to pass the message, subliminally or otherwise, that no, forget about the enforcement of law and order without bias or favor. We're doing it in the most biased fashion we can think of. And that is the unsorry state of affairs that we face today in Dominica.
Let me just ask you something there. Gable's joined us. Welcome, Gable. I'll come to you in a minute.
Good evening, everyone.
Yes, but Irving, I wanted to just bring you back to where you started, and all these people who were arrested and charged for the earlier demonstration. That was a few years back, and these charges went through the courts for 7 years. These cases, 7 years, and eventually they had to be dismissed for want of prosecution. And in fact, very expensive attorneys were brought in from outside. The question was asked, well, how much were these attorneys paid? And the powers that be refused to answer that question. But I mean, if these charges were brought there, these cases were called, the judge or the magistrate was there, and every time the prosecution comes and say, we're not ready, we're just not ready, what is the sense in doing this all over again for the March 19 situation? And look at the kind of expense it is put in the country.
Well, the message is clear. There's nothing subliminal about it. It's square. It's clear. We will go to any length to make sure that we use the judicial system to emasculate any opposition. Simple as that. I can say openly, I read the Crown's brief before the case, over 74 witnesses, and not a single one of those witnesses said anything that amounted to incitement in any way, in any shape, in any form. It was dishonest of the prosecution to have held this over the heads of these fellows for 7 years. They never had a case from day one against those who had been charged. But that is not the point. The point is to drain them, whether it's financially, whether it's to drain their movement, whether it is to ostracize them, whether it's to legally put the mark of the beast on their heads. That is the whole point. And let's face it, my understanding, and I can't vouch for it, I can't verify it, is that in the vicinity of $9 million over the said years was spent on these lawyers. These lawyers, for God's sakes. You know
the thing
these
is,
lawyers who just adjourn and adjourn and adjourn and adjourn and suck the taxpayers dry
well,
in
this
a
is
country where NEP workers are being paid less than $1,000 a month, in a country where certain small businesses are fighting to keep their heads above water, in a place where persons, quite frankly, are being denied the most basic assistance by the state, again, because of political considerations. But you can find $9 million or thereabouts, if that figure is correct, or thereabouts. And I have to say that it is probably in the vicinity of millions, because why else would they be afraid? Your Minister of National Security said that's a state secret. Taxpayers' money. Taxpayers' money. And if you broaden the analysis and you look at what is happening in the World Creole Music Festival, they're going to spend $13.4 million. My understanding, they're going to pay Cartel, over $2 million. Why don't you find out how much they're going to pay Gordon or Chubby or one of the local bands? And then you will understand the perversion. You will get a full extent of the contamination, which is eating away Dominica, and which is ensuring that, unlike all the other Eastern Caribbean islands, we are not progressing, we are regressing. Because it looks like we hate our own more than anything else, so that we can milk the cow much more than we are already milking it. Don't listen to me. Listen to Farid, what is his name is, for God's sake, Elf Reza, Farad, whatever it is. Listen to his comments on that Al Jazeera expose. 90% is theirs, 10% is taxpayers. And that's what's happening. That is the bottom raison d'etre, political contamination, for the whole question of the approach to rule of law, for the whole question of the approach to freedom of speech, for the whole question of freedom of assembly, and quite frankly, for the whole question of the approach to gun violence. The last, Pastor Rodney, thank you for appearing. Good to see you, sir. You cool?
Well, thank you very
You're
much.
in the,
I'm not just cool, I'm cold. I just came from the rain.
Well, that is fantastic. Well, I'm going to come to you directly because you were involved in that little gun initiative a few months ago.
Yes, yes.
Gun amnesty.
Mm-hmm.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, Pastor, you were able to get the monumental number of 2 guns, Gasson, which was surrendered to you. So let's nobody fool this kind of nonsense about, are we going to praise the police for this initiative? No, they don't deserve any praise because they're not doing their jobs. They're not doing their jobs. They're pandering so that they can get the promotion from the political directorate. That is the bottom line. And that is, quite frankly, the inconvenient truth, because the evidence is there for all to see. I thank you.
well, Pastor Rodney, welcome. Because I was going to go to Gabriel, but because Dr. Andre already now put you on the spot. Um, let's talk a little bit about this thing, about this crime, and about the initiatives that have been taken now. I mean, nothing new here. You were part of the last gun amnesty, and as Dr. Andre said, you collected what, 2 guns, 2 old guns maybe. But the point is this thing working, or is somebody else just passing the buck and not doing their jobs?
Well, thank you very much for having me, Mr. G. And I noticed you said Mr. Dr. Irwin Andre is your co-host. I don't know how I find myself on the other side of the counter with you and Irwin Andre and my past grammar school partner, Gabriel Christian. You already have an illustrious panel there that is way above my pay grade, according to a certain individual.
We'll forgive you for that.
But let's talk about the amnesty. A number of years ago, I think it was about 11 or 12 years ago, I will check my records and give you the exact date. We mounted a committee that we called the Interdenominational Committee Against Crime and Violence. That was headed then by Bishop Gabriel Malzer and myself and Marcus Francis, people like Simeon Joseph, and a number of other people sat on that committee. And we did some extensive work. When I tell you extensive, I really mean extensive work. We went into the whole pattern of crime, who's doing the crime, the people in the prison, why do we have repeat offenders, and all of that, right? And we produced a comprehensive report that we discussed with the then police commissioner, Daniel Carbon, with the president at the time, Charles Angelo Sovereign, and with the hierarchy of the government. And sadly, all of them did not see merit in what we were proposing. We were proposing then that the government started a gun amnesty without the involvement of the police, right? As happened in Jamaica a number of years ago, because we believed that way back then, people had no trust in the police. And even those who had trust would be fearful of reprisals if they had to bring these guns to the police. The police commissioner said at the time, let us do a job. Okay? Pack this aside. And they were only interested in a project that we had, co-written to request funding for a rehabilitation center. The proposed funders did not want government involvement in that at all. But government wanted to be at the helm of the project. And of course, it fell flat. When the last gun amnesty was called by the police, the announcement was made, and Bihanzin, the lawyer, after a few, maybe the amnesty was coming to an end, Bihanzin called me and he said, look, Pastor Randy, we need to do something about this because the police have not collected any guns. And then we rallied with us Monsignor John Lewis and Reverend Father Branca Briggs John. And we did a press conference on the ground floor of the old government headquarters, asking people to kindly bring the guns. That did not yield much fruit because the deadline was approaching, and then it was extended, I think, again for a week because of our initiative. The last gun amnesty, really and truly, was practically a repeat of the one before. Now, the police says that they have done the work in terms of that, but they have not taken anybody's advice in terms of understanding that the police that we now have functioning in Dominica, if anybody bring them a gun, that your name is in the book that way, and their eyes will be on you. People are afraid of that, and so the people again, refrain from bringing guns. the police calling a gun amnesty is of no consequence, actually. And even if they have a gun amnesty, we're going to have probably a worse result. But let me tell you what is frightening for me as far as the police is concerned on guns. I am of the opinion that the Commonwealth of Dominica Police Force should know where to look for the guns. Okay? Why am I making that summation? I'm making that because, one, you heard the Commissioner of Police, Papa Bonji, said that 49 guns came in through the customs. How do they know when Irvin Andre has a plant that he brought from Canada in his suitcase, and they cannot know who or where the guns came from? I have not been able to understand that. I understand that almost every port in the world have scanners for luggage, right? And those ports collaborate as far as that kind of information is concerned. So somebody has to know where the guns come from. Somebody has to know who are the guns consigned to, right? Now, let's go further than that. I live in the beautiful Commonwealth. I live in Emzor. And sometimes I hear noises coming from across the river, right? That I am sure are noises coming from some guns.
Let me just ask Gable. Gable, could you mute your mic?
All right. Now I am saying, Mr. G, that if I can hear that, somebody else must be hearing that or seeing that, for the matter of fact. But nobody else is taking action. Everybody's now asking the public to come forward to give them information that, quite frankly, the Dominican public now would be very afraid to provide information to the police. Now, I heard Mr. Police Commissioner said today that there are some police officers who you can contact. And I know there are. There are some good policemen. There are some good police officers that whom you can speak with. But the whole question now is, do the larger population trust these people? So that's the issue with the gun amnesty. Let me say final thing on this thing. I'm of the view, and I'm sure Gable will agree with me, because Gable was part of the grassroots revolution, if I put it that way, in his younger days, right? I am acutely aware, and I'm sure all of you gentlemen are, that anything you want to do well in a nation, you need the effort of all and sundry. You can't get the effort of all and sundry by debasing them, by harassing them, and expect them to turn around to support you. And that's why I have said over and over again, Mr. G, that the unity that our incumbent government is asking for is not that which Rosie Douglas would have asked for, is not that which Pierre Charles would have asked for, is not that which Edison James would have asked for. The unity they're asking for is come on our side to do what we want you to do. And that's the kind of unity they're asking for. But you are never going to get that. But we need everybody on board for something like that. The commissioner's tone should be different. The prime minister's tone should be different. The prime minister had to start. The prime minister spoke about lawlessness. And anybody who's listening, and I hope the prime minister himself is listening, the prime minister will remember a few years ago in his cabinet room that myself and the Roman Catholic bishop at the time, we both asked him to go on the radio. You said that when you made the comment that no law, no constitution will stop me from doing whatever, you said you did not mean that like that. Just go and tell the people that you did not mean it and say, I'm sorry. You know what? You understand that way, but I'm sorry. And he asked why. And we said, any spirit that comes from the head must flow through the body. That's why men must take care of their homes, because whatever men bring into the homes flow down through your children. The same thing happens in church as a manager, and worse as a prime minister of the country. So when you say a statement like that, that you have never told the people, I did not mean that I can break the law. And then your wife comes around and say, well, we have our snipers and Navy SEALs and so on. In any dotish mind, when you put those two statements together, it is saying that we can do what we want. We can function as we like, and we can break the law with impunity. And I am firm in my belief that that is one, not the only reason, but that's one of the reasons why we have that kind of lawlessness happening, and you have brazen gun brandishing in Roseau, plain midi, big broad daylight. People are not hiding to do these things anymore. And so I believe that we all must come together to do that. And it must be an invitation from the Prime Minister, a genuine invitation to say, fellas, I can't do this. I can't do this alone. And we need you. With no arrogance, with no taking down people, inviting all of us to help in the effort.
And thank you for that, Pastor Rodney. Now, Gabriel Christian, I don't know whether you've been following the conversation on the radio. I mean, the government had a press conference about this lawlessness, about these guns, about this violence, about these crimes. And I don't know how closely you've been following it, but the Prime Minister came out and he made 7 points. He established 7 points. I mean, he talked about, whatever it is. I mean, he made 7 points. I mean, one of them is this gun amnesty and asking people to bring in their guns within a limited window and setting up a task force and those kind of things there. But I mean, all of that, isn't that going to come to naught if the trust is not there? If the community does not trust the police, if as Pastor Rodney is saying, people don't feel they're committed to something real. In other words, if they just feel that this is just words coming from the mouth that is politically expedient, then they're not going to really respond to that. Your thoughts on some of this, Gil?
Well, first of all, I just want to thank you, Brother G, for inviting me to such an auspicious gathering with a distinguished judge who was once a strong attorney, and my brother from grammar school days, who was always a exemplar of good order. I don't think I ever had to bring him down for a caning. I think I was a prefect during the time we were together. And Brother Rodney, I just want to thank you, sir, for representing the best of our society, as our brother Irving has done consistently. Thank you, Irving. Thank you, Mr. G. And our brother at Master Control, Brother Lambie. Thank you, sir. Without you, we couldn't do it. The fact of the matter is I'm not a comedian. None of us here are comedians. And I value our beloved country too much to waste time giving credit to those who are good at speechifying and wearing fancy suits costing £7,000 when the country is ablaze with inequity. Let me just be blunt. I knew Irving during the independence movement. I knew Rodney during school days. Mr. G, you're perhaps the last member, other than somebody I know very well, of the Committee of National Salvation, who is very involved in public life. This didn't start yesterday. In 1998, when I came home, I was on What About with Lennox Linton, and I said, if we ever needed a cadet corps, we needed it now. Pastor Rodney may not have been a cadet, but he behaved like one. You, Mr. G, were a cadet. And Irvin Andre, I'm reliably informed, was at the hostel overlooking the quadrangle, where on the Thursdays at 1500 hours, the cadets gathered to do their thing. And he's always behaved as if he's a cadet. In 2000, we revived the cadet corps. There's a very specific reason for that. It had to do with civic leadership. It had to do with crafting upon our young people a certain degree of order and discipline without which we cannot succeed as a nation. We cannot succeed in tourism. We cannot succeed in agriculture. We cannot succeed in industry unless our people are disciplined and industrious. Further to that, we created a civics book, Mr. G, which you have actually placed on the Q95 website. Why did we do that, Pastor Rodney? Why did we do that, Brother Irving? We did that because we believed it's important for you to value engineer young people. I think of all of us here, Pastor Rodney is the one most skilled in biblical sayings. And Pastor Rodney, therefore, you can decide to give me a demerit if I'm wrong in the way I recite. Somewhere in the Bible it says, train a child when it's young in the right path. So when it grows old, or when he or she grows old, they may not depart from it. Pastor Rodney, is that the right recitation?
Actually, Gabriel, the original interpretation says it that way.
Okay.
Train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, it, which is the training, will not depart from him.
Amen. So look, I'm not the one, neither any of you, say the apostles of the principle or the philosophy of no law, no constitution can prevent me from doing what I want to do, to run for the election when I knew I was ineligible because of my foreign citizenship, i.e. my French citizenship. The rut starts from the head, You cannot expect a society to follow in the value system that is noble when you've propagated a value system that's ignoble. Neither one of us here on this program have been the ones who give a shout out to our SNEALs, what they call it, our SEALs and snipers, None of us did that. Dominica is a small country. Everybody knows that the folks who associate with the ruling party in Dominica on those motorcycles are people who are involved in nefarious activity. They're gun runners. They're dope dealers. It's not, and I'll be very respectful here as the first law firm in the history of Maryland to hire a Rastafarian, and he had to go by my rules because he would lose his bar license. And Mr. Andre knows who I'm talking about, because I think he had something to do with that person coming to my office in 2003. I think he worked with his mother in Canada. We've represented Rastafari for 32 years. When I say Rastafari, I mean the family of Emperor Selassie. That's why my son is named after Emperor Selassie's father, Makonnen, Ras Makonnen. So nobody's going to tell me about Rastafari. I sat on the Human Rights Committee with Brother Jermaine and Brian Alleyne at 16 as a member of the United Syrian Council. But I take strong offense to the belief that you can smoke marijuana and not get high. I don't know what kind of marijuana you can be smoking and you can advise a population to smoke it and not get high. I believe that if you're Rastafarian and you have a sacramental belief in the herb and you want to take it once a month at worship, and then you go about your business and you do agriculture industry, maybe that might work. But if anyone in Dominica has seen a priest or bishop or a brother or nun sitting by the side of the road eating lusty, I'm not sure. Pastor Rodney is not a Catholic, but I think he knows enough about Catholicism. The lusty is what they would give you on a Sunday. I think you only get it once. You can't come back in the line. You go in once, you get to sit down. I don't think anyone has seen in Dominica or any Catholic country a nun, a brother, a priest, a bishop, a cardinal sitting by the side of the road eating lusty all the time. They have things to do. And if we are serious about this whole issue in Dominica of law and order, we cannot be encouraging our young people to smoke dope or drink alcohol to excess. And that's what's happening in Dominica. So hit me if you want, but the reality is, brothers and sisters, I have not seen anybody who has made the use and abuse of cannabis sativa a lifestyle succeed. And I'm not going to be a hypocrite on your program. Like one president said that he smoked and didn't inhale. In my time, it was quite common. My parents didn't know it, but when it was passed, I did partake. Luckily, I did not stay with it. Here I am. So I'm not trying to pass on to young people value systems that are not valuable, that are not useful. Smoking any sort of drug, any sort of mind-altering substance, drinking to excess, not studying your lessons, jump up all the time. That's the bane of our existence. Those things are not helping us as a society. Now, let me talk about civil rights, and let me talk about what it is we've done. So we did the Cadet Corps. Irving was part of that, because when we set the Cadet Corps program in place, it was helped along by the Dominica Academy of Arts and Sciences, many of whose founders were cadets. Dr. Dave Shillingford, Raglan Rivera, Dr. Clayton Shillingford, all those persons, Dr. Sam Christian, all those persons, Francis Richards, all these people, Arlington James, all of them were cadets. I wonder why. I wonder why so many of our people, with the few exceptions of a president who didn't do his job, who I believe I was told was a cadet, maybe Mr. G can tell me, I wonder why so many of our upstanding citizens served in things like the Girl Guides and the Boy Scouts and the Cub Scouts and the Rangers and the cadets. They came through a value engineering process. And all we are saying is that what have we done to really ensure that we have civic education in the schools? So that understanding of our Constitution is something that's at an apex. Understanding of a rule of law is something that's at an apex. How many times has Tony Estefan taken time off from his profession to go to any school in Dominica to talk about our Constitution or talk about rule of law? He ends up on the animal farm program on that other station, and he berates people, and he uses profane language and things like that. That doesn't help the community. Let me just say a few things about one Peter Saint-Jacques. Peter Saint-Jacques is a Dominican criminologist. Irving knows him. He's maybe been on the program before, and he wrote a book on crime fighting in Dominica. It was called Lessons from Grand Bay, a case for evidence-based crime reduction in Dominica. And in this work, he offers a powerful critique of traditional punitive approaches to crime and instead advocates for evidence-based community-centered strategies aimed at addressing the root causes of violence and criminal behavior. Some of the things he talked about include as follows: evidence-based policy making. Dr. Cesar urges Dominican policymakers to use data and research. Listen to me now. To use data and research to craft crime reduction strategies rather than relying on reactive or politicized responses. So you can come and make your fancy speech in your fancy suit that is maybe 2 or 3 times the average monthly wage of an average Dominican. But that is not going to make a difference because it's reactive. Is it based on data? Is it based on research? No, it's not. He calls for crime mapping of communities. Listen to what Pastor Randy says. He says when he's on the side of the river by Emsall, where the folks in high society live, and he hears the noises on the other side, it appears to him that those are gunshots. He may not use those exact words, but I think that's what he was trying to say. We have to be able to use data and research to map communities. Why is that important? Because if you can do crime mapping of a community, of a nation, we're a small country. When I was in grammar school with Randy and Irving, and after Mr. G, we used to say 305 square miles. I guess we've had some erosion. It's now 289 square miles, maybe more precise map making. So we have a small country. How many people we have now in 100,000? Some people said it's 60,000. So we don't have a huge population. Why can't we use that sort of data-based, evidence-based research to tackle where there are what you call incubators of criminal behavior? Number 2, a holistic and preventive approach. He emphasizes education, economic empowerment, and youth engagement as key pillars of crime prevention, and he advocates for job creation, mentorship programs, and skill building as tools to redirect at-risk individuals from crime. Where is the Londonderry Youth Camp, Pastor Rodney? Where is the old technical wing, Brother G? Where are those sorts of programs that give young people jobs that can allow them to have a living wage that will take them away from idle hall estate into the realm of productivity? It does not exist. Community involvement is the 3rd pillar. Encourage grassroots participation. Brother Randy said I was a grassroots man. That was correct. I plead guilty. Grassroots participation in designing and implementing crime reduction programs. Promote local leadership and partnerships between the police, civic organizations, and churches and non-governmental organizations. And finally, environmental design and urban planning. He recommends, and that's before they started building these apartments, which I think very soon will become other incubators of crime because of the way they've done it. because they're disconnected from farming, they're disconnected from industry, and they have to depend on the power rep to pay their utilities. So he recommends using crime prevention through environmental design principles to transform communities into livable, prosperous centers of civilization. And here you have it, a PhD in criminology, advising countries all over the world, a member of the Dominican Academy. During the time we bought, not only did we help bring back the Cadet Corps, we bought on the Matthias Lestrade cameras for CID. We bought a dingy for the police at Portsmouth so they could go out into the Portsmouth roadstead and help interact with yachts coming in. So because they were incapable of providing policing of the yachts. They had no dingy. The academy bought the dingy. So I'm saying to Dominicans, these are the things done by the traitors to Dominica, the enemies of the state, so-called, in the diaspora. These are the things we did. We didn't come and talk about it on Q95. We quietly did those things. We worked with the police. Many of the cadets now are in the police service. I'm hoping that they're doing a good job. So I just want to say that we have come to our island with specifics, bringing resources, bringing people who have a person like Judge Andre, myself, Pastor Rodney, those kinds of Dominicans in and out with skills. If we can be non-partisan and inclusive and have, in fact, that kind of advice from people who know what they're doing, we'd have a better country. But instead, we have a one-party state philosophy that pushes away Dominicans who want to help Dominica. We allocate resources to penalize Dominicans who disagree with government, and then we wonder why we're going down slowly, as Spider used to say. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that, Gable. Dr. Andre, I want to come back to you to bring the conversation back to the whole question of free speech. Now, based on all these arrests that we've seen over the years, the first set of years ago, and then on March 19, after the March 19 protest, we see all these arrests and people being paraded into court. And we know that for the next 5 to 7 years, they're going to be paraded in court. And, these cases are all going to be dismissed for want of prosecution. Would you say that what we're experiencing now is tantamount to government freedom, exercising freedom to stifle speech, and government exercising freedom to stifle protests?
But of course, and it's not just stifle protests, it's stifle freedom of speech. Because the message is clear. You will pay a price if you dare oppose us publicly or even privately. And you will pay a price even if you do not exercise freedom of speech in a manner that is critical of the government. But even if your nenen, your uncle, your beau-père, your mother or father, they will also pay a price. They will be deprived of the benefits of support. That is the message that is being related to all and sundry. We have, whether we like it or not, we have created a climate of immorality in Dominica, which is manifested in all different ways. Gabriel talks about unemployment. Employment, you say? What about no-bid contracts? What about boasting of foreigners who can ship out $240 million annually? What about persons deprived of opportunities because they are perceived not to be a member, one of us? What about the initiative by Danny Logay and Thompson Fontaine a few years ago trying to get farmers and to ship Dominican produce to the French Islands? What happened to it? What about a fellow called Mackenzie Sevre who started a toilet paper company at a time when Venezuela was in dire need of toilet paper? What did they do to facilitate the export of Dominican produce to those countries? Nothing. Why? Because the intent is not to stimulate, but to stifle local production, restricted to the sale of passports. And we know why they love the sale of passports so much. It's not to pay NEP workers $800 to $1,000 a month. or to build apartments which basically will cause more harm over the long term than good, but it is to line their pockets. The evidence, both direct, both circumstantial, both also anecdotal, suggest. And Ralph Gonzalez told us why too. Ralph Gonzalez says it blatantly as to why it is so attractive to those of his brothers and sisters in the Eastern Caribbean that hug the CBI program so tightly, because they are the major beneficiaries. And we've seen that right here in Dominica. It's not a secret. It's only a secret if you're willfully blind. So this is what's happening. This is what is afflicting Dominica. I mean, Gabriel lament, unfortunately, the prevalence of the smoking of marijuana. Now, I'm not going to comment on anybody's personal choices. All I can say with great pride, Mr. G, my herb of choice in my time was a humble herb called Tabac Zombie. And that is what I had. It wasn't addictive. I walked away from it without any problems. I managed to fulfill my ambitions, which is to seek avenues to higher study. Thanks to the library. Sorry, I haven't seen the library for a little while. What is the condition of the library? Huh? You tell me. I heard I heard some dogs were protesting. Fix the library because they can't even sleep there again. It's deliberately being left in a dilapidated condition. What about the house on Mont Bruce, where people like Edward Oliver LeBlanc and Patrick Roland John used to spend their time? It's too old. They have a disregard for things they consider old. No sense of history, no sense of antiques or collectibles or things that have inherent value. What they want is a nice little concrete building with no soul, with no semblance of any kind of dignity, of any type of class, of any type of distinction, anything which marks out this country as a country that is not only aware of its past, but that has embraced its past and make it in itself an attraction to not just tourists, but Dominicans who reside abroad. So we have to look at this in a very holistic fashion. Even our music that we embrace. Have we taken the time off as a community to find out about the travails of these musicians of the 70s who blazed such a wonderful trail, whether it's Gordon Henderson, whether it's Chubby and the Midnight Groovers, whether it's Gramax, whether it's some of the other musicians, the sufferation they experienced in the French islands, the exploitation, the degradation. Because if we understood that, then we would not be paying them crumbs today to perform in the World Creole Music Festival, while paying Vice Cartel or whatever the name is over $2 million to preach a gospel of violence. You see, these fellas are talking about preventing gun violence, eh? But you're embracing a musician who venerates gun violence. And then we feel that we've arrived. We've arrived. Your musicians, whether it's Nas, you can't perform in Jamaica for God's sakes. And you're talking this errant nonsense about Caribbean unity. You're insulting people's intelligence by justifying that degradation on the altar of Caribbean unity, about the evolving tastes. I mean, this is the garbage these persons are selling. And then you come and piously talk about the proliferation of gun violence in Dominica. You're not serious. You're not serious. They've made a whole mockery of this thing. That's the problem. And we are our own worst enemies. When we talk about youth fleeing Dominica, why? What about youth employment? What kind of meaningful employment we are giving them? To work at what? Clearwater or Muddy Water, whatever the name is, I can't remember. Menial jobs after you go to state college and you get qualified in different fields. There's nothing there. And God forbid that you're the son or daughter of somebody who is perceived not to be a supporter. The door is closed. We have to talk about these things when we talk about this thing about gun violence and society, and because that is what has metastasized in Dominica. This political victimization contamination. It has affected every institution of governance in Dominica. And that is why, as Gabriel quoted so eloquently, the Spider's Woods resonate today as much as they resonated over 20 years ago. We are going down slowly. And the task is whether we have the moral fortitude to Phoenix-like, or like Lazarus, to change that course of action. Thank you, Mr. G.
Yes, and Pastor Rodney, over to you now. We lived long enough to remember there were protests under Edward LeBlanc. There were protests under Patrick John. There were protests under Eugenia Childs, under Edison James, under Rosie Douglas himself led many protests. But it appears to me today that the way the government is behaving is as if freedom of speech or freedom to protest is like a gift from them that they have to donate to people. In other words, if you go out there and you protest, they arrest you and charge you. It's like it is something that they must confer upon you. You cannot do that without their permission. You give me your thoughts on this, because we see this arrest still going on willy-nilly, and this case is going to court, black is white, and nothing's going to come out of it.
Mr. G, the first protest that I ever was part of, again, Gable will probably remember that, was at the Dominica Grammar School. We protested over Elrose fumes. Okay? Students protested, walked out of the school, and we got a hearing. We got the whole thing to be changed temporarily at first, and every time it happened, we walked out. Now, nobody came at us with guns. Nobody sent tear gas to us. I remember once we walked from grammar school and we walked through the streets of Roseau in our uniforms. Okay? And I'm talking about as a student of the Dominica Grammar School. Maybe about a year ago, when this whole protesting was getting out of hand, a police officer called, Kingdom Connection, the program, because I was making the point that somehow the incumbent government, and quite frankly, the blame is going to be placed at their feet, because that's where it is, that's where it belongs, has changed the trajectory of everything we do in Dominica. The atmosphere of everything is changed. Why? Well, go back to 1979. Okay? I was at the ministry on the 29th of May, 1979. I saw firsthand the abuse that some of the politicians got walking through the gate to go up to where the House of Assembly was then, on the 5th floor of the government building. The police at the time were dressed in their regular uniform. Okay? They had formed two lines and everything else. They were dressed in their regular uniform with their batons, I guess, until things escalated and then the defense force came. Today, if you're having a meeting, just a meeting, that is not sanctioned by the Dominican Labour Party, you have an army of police who show up in army fatigues. You have drones flying over your head, taking out pictures and recording what's happening. You have a cadre of plainclothes police all over the place, recording and watching and taking out photographs and so on. And all of that is in an effort to silence free speech. It's in an effort to quiet the people. It's in an effort to shut the people up. Now, when you look at the whole thing, when you look at the thing as a whole, there is a nexus in everything that is happening in Dominica by the incumbent. Okay, and that might be far-fetched, but I want you to follow me. I heard part of the press conference, and I'm sure I heard the Prime Minister say, I have to be careful about that, because sometimes when I quote the Prime Minister, he says that he did not say that. But I'm sure I heard the Prime Minister say in the press conference today that the government is prepared to pay $1,000 for anybody returning a gun. Right? Now,
That's
come
correct.
with me. Come
That's
with me.
correct. Yeah.
Come with me. So what does that tell me? What does that draw my mind to? No longer are we teaching people their civic responsibility. No longer are we saying to people that if you are a bona fide Dominican, you have responsibility to guard, to safeguard the health of your nation, the life of your people. No longer are we each other's keepers. Somebody has to give us a backhand to make sure or to attempt to ensure that things go well. Tied up. Money is used as a means of control. I go back to the Bible. The Bible says that the God of money have blinded people's minds. The word that is used in the Old King James is the word mammon. But the word mammon means money, the God of money. What have we done? We have used a certain authority or an abuse of the authority to control people. And for those we can't control with the abuse of the authority, we try to seduce them into silence with money, right? Whether it's money for the guy sitting on the roadside doing nothing, we pay their rent, or whether we build some apartments and we put some lazy guys in there as well. We do that. The nexus is there, Mr. G. We are losing our democracy. In fact, maybe I should say we have lost our democracy because of all of that. Now, I do not know if you paid attention to Dr. Heinz Myrie, who is doing a study, a PhD study on democracy in the Caribbean, and has been using Dominica, St. Vincent, Barbados as test cases. And one of the things that she's drawing out is that there are some strategies that are now being used to erode the people's democracy, to erode their rights to speak, to take away from them their right to say, no, we don't want that, right? So our government now is not listening to anybody as far as what they desire, what they want, what they have a right to is concerned, right? We hear words like, well, yeah, we had a few consultations, but we're going to do this and we stop taking any comments, right? Or the cabinet will look at it, and when the cabinet decides that's what it is, we take it to parliament, right? And that is the kind of spirit that we have. Now, people like Gabriel Christian and Irvin Andre, very astute historical students, can help us there. We know, in my reading and my writing and my observation, I know that anytime governing authorities get to the place where they take those actions, what they're saying is, take what you get and shut up. Don't say a word. We will decide what happens to you. We will decide what you eat. We will decide how much you eat. We will eat what we want, because, you know, we can have $64,000 just a month to take care of us and our house. But we'll give you 800, and we say to you, with the 800 that we're going to give you, you have to save 200 from it, even if your house rent is 1,000 too. We will dictate that to you, right? So we see an aggressive work towards shutting up people in every sphere. Somebody said to me some time ago, Pastor Randy, you know I work in, right? I love what you do. I applaud what you do, and I support you. You are right in what you do. You are speaking for me, because I can't speak for myself. I have a job with the government. right? What is that? That is taking away your freedom to speak. It's taking away your democratic rights. It's eroding a democracy so that one person or a group of people come out with the largest of the country's finances, comes out with the largest of the country's properties, right? And they will drive the people away. You know, it was about 12 years ago that I was sitting in St. Martin at a restaurant interview, and I was talking to a minister of government at the time, and asking him questions about, you know, what has happened to Phillipsburg, right? And we were talking about Phillipsburg from the perspective of the ownership of the properties on Front Street and Back Street. And he said, unfortunately, almost all of, in fact, all of Front Street have been sold to foreigners. And most of Back Street is already sold to foreigners. So that St. Martiners do not own much property in their city, right? And I came back here and studying what was happening, and I said to the public that one of those days we will be foreigners in our own land. And I was chastised by senior members of the Labour Party. I was called all kinds of names, including, you know, the senior council, because I said so. But what do we see happening today? Who are buying up the prime properties in Dominica? Right? What happens when other people control your economy? You don't have a choice but to be subservient. You have to follow or toe the line. So freedom of speech is effectively eroded. Your freedom of democracy and freedom of movement in the country that you call your own, which I believe, I heard Mr. Blackmore said something, was it yesterday or today, whenever it was. But I believe that the Constitution provides that as a citizen of the Commonwealth of Dominica, Papa Bondye say, Maui Joseph, I have some rights to some property that I have, and we have two attorneys that they need to help me on this. That my home that I built with my blood, sweat, and tears, Bondye, is mine, right? And Irvin and Drake cannot leave Goodwill or Canada and break and open my door and enter and do what he wants in my fridge and pull my wife from her bed and say they're searching my wardrobe for whatever body. I mean, come on. I have some rights. I ought to have some rights. So that I do not understand that in a democratic country, the Minister of Legal Affairs says, no, the police has rights to do this and to do that. He has never said to the people that you have a right to. He says the police has a right to. In other words, the police can feel that today I don't like Gabriel Christian. The way he walked in there, I am just going to suspect that he has a bulo of drugs in his back pocket, and I will do something to get him out of his house. Right? And this is where we are, Mr. G. So our freedom of speech is eroded. Our freedom of movement is eroded. Our freedom to support who we want has gone to the bin. A gentleman met me just today, and he said, Pastor Rodney, I noticed that the Prime Minister was at your church a couple of weeks ago. I said I was out of state. Now, what does that imply? What does that tell you? The gentleman who I don't know knows or verily believes that if I am the person conducting the funeral at the church that we have built with our hands, even if the Prime Minister Cousin, who died, he probably wouldn't come, right? Because I am there, right? And I am one of those who will tell you verily that no lesser person. And again, Gibu, I'm going to refer to you on that, because sometimes I hear you speak about these offices and you speak about them very well. And I love when you refer to the history. But when you have a cabinet secretary who tells a young, intelligent university graduate that he must not go to that church because it's Randy that's pastoring it. How comes it's that church you're going to? An intelligent man like you. The cabinet secretary. Okay? Where are we?
The civil service has been politicized. There's a former student of mine who you know well in agriculture who would go into the meetings with a red shirt. So they've turned the civil service into an arm of the government. It's one party state. But I'll wait for the Master of Ceremonies, Mr. G, to appoint who they should speak next, because I have a lot to say. But God bless you, Pastor Randy. And I can tell you, Pastor Randy, the time we marched for Roseau, we were in school together, was the lift spot crisis. In 1979, sometime January, February.
Yeah. No, but Gabo, yeah, I know you have a lot of comments to make on all of this, but I wanted you, while you're making those comments, to put your mind on this for me, if you can. With all what is going on, I mean, do you get a sense, for example, that that we have, or did we have more freedom of speech and freedom to protest under colonial rule? It is appearing as if we had more under colonial rule than we have now after 47 years of independence.
I intend to write an essay called Colonialism Reconsidered. And not because I believe in colonialism, but in that period after World War II, when we had in universal adult suffrage, and we had Baron, Libla, and so forth and so on, we had much more freedoms than we have now. We had much more of an organized government. I'm saying this as someone who was involved in the independence movement, and our rights were respected much more. Britain had evolved, colonialism had evolved to a place that is far superior to what we have today. Pastor Rodney said it. You had people like Angelo Severet, the joker who was president of Dominica, head of CSA. How many times was he arrested and put in jail on bogus charges? Zaboka, how many times was he arrested and put in jail? How many times did they bring high-powered lawyers from Jamaica and Trinidad to prosecute people from the Freedom Party? We had trade unions in Dominica. Do we have trade unions now? We had the Herald, we had the Chronicle, we had the Star. We had people walking up and down in demonstrations. None of them tear gas. The first time I smelled tear gas in Dominica was May 29, 1979. So the reality is, we have to be frank, We have to reconsider the fact that during the time of associated statehood, when we had our own internal government and the association of Britain, Dominica was a more law-abiding country. We had our issues. But let me tell you what happened in 2007. I met Irving. 2006, he had just done a book on Dr. Desmond McIntyre, I believe. And he pulled me aside. He said, Gable, I've gotten the Commission of Inquiry report into the 1963 fire. Like Justice St. Bernard. A commissioner was appointed by the administrator, Colonel Alex Lovelace, had the names of the witnesses, who was burnt, who was there. We appended it to the book, Death by Fire, the explosive story of the 1963 Carnival tragedy, to show Dominicans the level of sophistication we had in investigating matters in public controversy. Today, we've had tens of thousands of dollars diverted to a mystery company in Pennsylvania in the infamous Bin Bobol. No commission of inquiry. We've had 2 people killed in police custody. No trial. No commission of inquiry. We've had 6 high-profile banditti, gangsters, mafiosi, arrested with Dominican diplomatic passports. Sheridan Gregoire. Diplomatic passports, Judge Andre. Diplomatic passports, Pastor Randy. These are not the ordinary ones they sell in Dubai, and take 90% of the money. These are diplomatic passports which are not supposed to be sold. Have we had one commission of inquiry? Has the Financial Intelligence Unit launched one investigation to find out how, why, and where those passports were issued to international criminals? So here we are in 1963. A fire took place, and more than 30 years later, we were able to recreate based on the depositions and the statements and the witnesses. As a matter of fact, once we saw a name, Randy, once we saw a name, Mr. G, once we saw a name, Lambi, we went to those persons who were still alive. Emmanuel Laverty, the gentleman who was the West Indies gas station, what's his name again? Macmillan.
Macmillan.
The trotter lady, Twist Bertrand, all these people who were still alive. Oh, and Philip, we were able to recreate the story. That is due process. That is organization. That is rule of law. Today we have crime up and down, and not one in 25 years, Pastor Randy. In 25 years, Mr. G. In 25 years, Irving, not one solitary commission of inquiry, although they have a senior counsel. I'm not sure what he's senior in. So the answer, yes. The answer is yes. We had more rule of law. We had more civil rights. We had more freedom during the time we grew up on Dominica. And that's just an incontrovertible fact. Call me what you want. I think I have and Randy as well, and Irving, and you too, Mr. G, and Brother Lambi, I think we have the virtue of having lived through that time. I was telling a young person, talking about law and order. When I was a child in Rosa, Randy, Irving, G, there's a guy called Frank. He was a truancy officer. If he saw you out of school during the time you were supposed to be in school, he arrest you and bring you to the fortune. And they would spank you and put you back in school. You talk about garbage. There's a guy called Solomon Tongbode in full khaki, brown boots, brown belt, and a swagger stick like a police inspector, and a khaki Pete helmet. And they'd come into your yard and say, something like that. I don't speak Patois too well. Irvin is better than I am. He'll come into your yard and say, I do not want to come here and see that puddle of water because it may have larvae of the Aedes aegypti mosquito, which could then cause a public health issue. And he would patrol the yards in Roseau. Do we have that now? Is that the country we talk about independent? Are we making progress or are we going backwards? These are the things I need young Dominicans to know we used to have. The fire service every 5 a.m., 5:30 a.m., they would wash down Roseau with their hoses. Is that happening now? They'll take the water from the Rosary River and douse the streets and take the stench away. When last did you see that happening? Talk to me.
You know, you're right. None of those things are happening now, and the Rosary is filthy. But Irving, I want to come back to you because really and truly, who really protects our freedoms? I mean, is it the people, or do we rely on the people, or do we rely on the police? Do we rely on the courts? Who really protects our rights and our freedoms?
As a democracy, we should be able to rely on the law enforcement apparatus in Dominica. We should be. Because that is their mandate. That's what they've been paid to do. And let's face it, it's taxpayers' money, not DLP money who pays them. But again, it's a measure of the rot that in fact they're policing in a very untransparent, in a very partisan fashion. They've surrendered the apparatus of law enforcement to the political directorate. And that is a dangerous thing. I remember a very prominent Dominican whose house was broken into in Clark Hall, if I recall correctly. I think he contacted the law authorities. He died years after, and there was no investigation. And I bet each of your panelists can give numerous examples of precisely that. We will investigate based on who you are, or should I say, who you support. That's not right. Go back a few years ago to Glenn Emanuel. Think of how many pronouncements from senior government people going right up to the office of the president of Dominica, who made bold statements, oh, it's going to be investigated. And here is something that happened that probably never happened in the annals of law enforcement. You had somebody who gave a confession. Police forces all over. That is what they look for, because invariably that is the strongest evidence against an accused, his or her own incriminating statement. This fella gave an incriminating statement. Mais il pas touché. They will not touch it. Why? Because we know why. It incriminated one of the boys. And that itself right there is a symbol of what passes for law enforcement in Dominica. We will only investigate if you have the right, if you wear the right colors. Once I went up to Foncole and there was a supervisor of a road gang. His hat was red. His shirt was red. His vest was red. His pants was red. His shoes was red. His kerchief in his back pocket was red. What does that tell you, Gasson? Pastor Rodney, you can read them. You can decipher from a biblical perspective much better than I. What does that tell you? And you see it replicated almost on a daily basis when you're in Dominica. Because it's a proclamation, I am one of the anointed. I deserve all the favors, all the preferential treatment that you are handing out. Because if I commit an illegal act, you pick a way, they will not enforce. If I go to Jolly's and enjoy myself and they have me on video, no cause to fear. You pick a fear. That's the message that is being sent. So how can we talk about lack of law and order with that kind of mentality? You tell me, Mr. G. You're a man of great wisdom. Huh? How can we talk about those things when that is the message being sent out in your society? We will not investigate you. If you join the gang of riders, you'll be fine. It's all good. And then we lament the breakdown of our value system. We talk about the proliferation of guns. We talk about violence against underage women, intimate sexual violence. Huh? But the message we're sending out is it's okay. Once you wear the right colors, it's fine. It's no problem. But Sodom and Gomorrah cannot exist indefinitely. Something will give, and something has to give. And as somebody called Pastor Ronnie always says, you shall reap, not dashing, but you shall reap what you sow. And we as a community, we will reap what we sow. It has to get worse before it gets better, because we're allowing this thing to happen. Mr. Gregor, you raised the rhetorical question, who ensures or guarantees our freedom of speech? The courts, the people, the police. I would place more faith in the people when they have gained the understanding as to our values and what is important and what is not. And vice cartel is not on that list of what is important or who is important, for God's sakes. It reflects a perversion. It is a measure of our perversion that is someone we want to give $2 million. Pastor Rodney, as if you have nothing that you could do with $2 million. There's nothing you can do with $2 million, Gaza. Buy vice cartel. And he rides off in the sunset. And then we talk about we're embracing new music. So how you gonna do that? No calypsos there because they're afraid of their lyrics. They're afraid of Dice or people like Bob, people like Checo, even Joyce Stout. They ain't touching them at all. And then we preach and we pontificate about lawlessness, about value system, when we're literally frittering away the wealth of the island. We're letting it go to waste. We are sowing our seeds on desert or stony soil. And then we comment piously making big speeches, 10-point plan or 7-point plan. 7 is the mark of the beast, quite frankly. So the change this is not magic. This is not rocket science. The change rests within us. The court system is as good or as bad as we want it to be. We should not be able to express or exercise our freedom of expression, even when the system of justice is failing us. And some of these fellas are talking about, oh, you're not a lawyer. You shouldn't criticize. Some of these folk do believe that they hold the power and the knowledge of the whole system. Nonsense. You have the right to criticize any decision that you wish. You have the right to point out the failings of the system. You have the right to point out that we know we deserve better. Because after all, the system should be serving us. It should be serving us, giving us the confidence that issues or conflict will be litigated in a manner which is fair, which does not reflect any type of bias. We shouldn't have to worry about what favor this lawyer or that lawyer did for which judge or that judge. We shouldn't have to worry about which justice of the peace or which magistrate is taking calls from a minister of government during a bail hearing. That is an abomination. And in any other country, certainly the country where I preside, that person would be fired. We must not pretend that these folk are upholding the duties and the obligations of their office, because they are not. On the contrary, they're prostituting them. And it's only when we make those issues as clear as day, when we show that we stand for something, when we are not afraid. And I'm not naive. I understand the victimization that goes on. I'm in Dominic all the time. You know, I understand. I could speak more about that, but I will hold my peace for the time being. We have to realize, Pastor Rodney gave an example, you know, about if poor fellow called Andre Abacus broke into his house and so on. But why are we allowing foreigners to break into our house, our island home, and take what should be ours? Our business opportunities, bonuses from the sales of passports, preferential treatment, no bid contracts, duty-free concessions. Huh? When you're having persons trying to break down a credit union to get the $50 that they have, which is owed to them. That's what's happening. We wouldn't allow anybody to break into our individual houses. So why should we allow persons abroad to break into our island home and steal our cherry possessions? It wouldn't happen anywhere, any other island. And it shouldn't happen in Dominica. And that is the message that we should pass on to our brothers, our sisters, our friends, our compatriots, our children, that you have to be able to fight for what is most dear to you. And if your heritage and your future is not dear to you, we're back on it. We're back on it. What will be dear to you in the future? Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Andre. Pastor Rodney, just taking off on the note at which Dr. Andre just left off. How do we change the mindset of the people so that they will understand that the fight is theirs, it is in their hands to fight for their own rights, their rights to free speech, their rights, to demonstrate, to protest, the right to change a government. This is what other countries in the region do. This is what Dominica did for years. And then all of a sudden, we don't do that anymore. How do you go wrong about changing the mindset of the people to make them understand that they really have to stand for what is right for them?
Mr. G, let me put it that way. From where I sit, some minds are being changed. And I take a lot of comfort in that some people are beginning to understand, wait a minute, I was duped. Somebody fooled me. But I'm not letting them key on me again, right? So we have that. What it will take continuous education at a different level. The issue as it is in Dominica now is as follows. The strategy that's been used by the Labour Party, I understand, advised by a gentleman from Barbados, is that if you take away the people's power to earn, you will get them to follow you as you give them, those little trifles. But what the people are now beginning to realize is that even what is given to us is not given to us. So for example, Mr. G, I've had quite a number of conversations with the people who live in the borrowed houses, right? And when they show me the piece of paper, I said to them, you can't take that anywhere. And then when the Minister of Housing asked them to be patient, it will happen. I said to them, be patient for what again? What are you going to be patient for? Right? Here is how long it takes to get a certificate of title. The mechanisms for certificate of title is with government, not with somebody else. Right? Government have a law that was passed by the United Workers' Party on something called strata titles. All of you who live in your apartments can get a title for your apartment because there is a legislation that's passed that's on the books for strata titles. I said, go ask the people at Riverbank or the people at the Bath Estate place there. They will tell you that they have a title to their property. I said, go there, you'll see that all the apartments now look different because people change your windows, they change the color of the apartment, they close on the porch, some of them, because they can do that. I said, you can't even change a broken window because Kaila se pasao. It's not yours. They just lend it to you to live in until you decide you're not going to vote for them anymore. They are beginning to understand that. People are beginning to understand, for example, that the boast of NEP is not what it was initially introduced to be. NEP was supposed to be a training ground, if I remember rightly, how it was proposed. Now, NEP seems to be a means of employment for people who don't have employment, that you give them $800 for. You send them to a school to teach, but you give them $800. Your friend, who's a friend of the government, have their private business, and they don't want to spend money to employ staff. Then they apply to the government, they give them somebody and pay them $800 a month, and so on. That's what it has become. Right? Now, what is that? That is actually putting people on the poverty line because there is no future in NEP. You can't go to any bank and raise nothing. Right? You can't even say you have a permanent job. You don't have security of tenure. You don't have anything. So NEP really and truly is a wise process used to take your life from you, not in your livelihood anymore, your life, right? Now, what's happening in Dominica when you look at that? People are now being depressed. And that depression is leading to bad places. Gabu said something earlier on that I got flack for from Mr. Reginald Austri when the whole question of the legalization of cannabis was introduced. I got plenty flack from Mr. Austri for it because I said there is evidence on the ground that drug-induced psychosis is on the increase. Now, if you walk the streets of Roseville, I don't know when last you were there, Irwin Andre, but I'm sure the next time you come back, you'll see a couple new faces, young boys, walking the street and you wonder, every day I look, I say, buddy, another one again. Another one again. Why? Drug-induced psychosis. That's not lusty. I like what Gabu said. That's not lusty. And even if it was lusty, you can take lusty, sit by the road and it lusty all the time. Right? The government is not interested in that. So what we're doing now, some of us, is strategically educating these guys. I said, listen, you must be happy that they legalized ganja, right? Yeah, okay. Why? Well, I can smoke a couple. Well, listen, if you only want the legalization of ganja for smoking, then here are the benefits and here are the dangers. Once you hit, how do you call it, drug TCP in cannabis, then that's why you get high. That ain't good for you. These are the results of you smoking ganja, right? So whoever is telling you can smoke it is not doing you well. I said the people who want to legalize it, here is why they want to legalize it. They already have their greenhouses with their ganja planted in it, and it's not to smoke. They have their greenhouses to make cannabis oil. So they're doing that not for you. And I remind people, and again, you historians can help me out. When bananas were introduced to the region very earlier on, the benefits of banana growing was with the people who were importing it, East Industries Limited. When over years that changed and farmers began to receive more benefit, until then, I think Edison was either transitioning from DBG and so on, and then they started with Deco later on, and with Deco decided that no, we want to do our own shipping. So the region began to benefit a little bit more from this thing. But the benefits of bananas then was going back to the colonizers. Check Jamaica. What is happening in Jamaica today? Jamaica is now being flooded with people from USA who now decide, okay, you're going to legalize ganja. We will put our money into that investment, right? And that is where we're going to go. So at the end of the day, we will still end up with our people just smoking ganja, right? Without the real benefits that could be accrued from it because of how the system is being set up, right? All of that for me comes down to the same base, that if you impoverish the people, you can control them. You will be able to tell them what you want and so on. What our job is now? To educate them, to decide to tell them this is what is best for us. This is how we think we should go, because this is how you will benefit. It is a slow process, Mr. G, but it is worth the effort to educate people in that regard.
No, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. And Gable, we're running out of time, as you can see. But I'm pretty sure there's a couple of things that you would like to add to the conversation.
I just fully endorse what Brother Randy said. Brother Randy, it's the same scenario here. The people who make money in the U.S. cannabis industry don't smoke. They don't smoke. They have the licenses for their hemp oil and they have their clinics. And you don't see African Americans in the ownership class. You see African Americans in the user class. And then they occupy the jails and are poverty stricken. Because the reality is, when you're high, be it on rum, SIWO, or cannabis sativa, or cocaine or heroin, you're high. And when you're high, you're dry. Dry in your poor health, dry in your inability to learn, dry in your palace economic state. And so we cannot let sentimentality or any belief that we support Selassie or anything like that. Selassie didn't smoke. The Ethiopian royal family, they don't smoke. And this is someone who is a friend of Rastafari, you see. But we have to be, they say friends don't let friends drink and drive it. When we tell the folks in government in Dominica to stop lying, cheating, and stealing, it's not because we're against them or we hate them. No, it's because we know it's bad for them, it's bad for the country. And we see where that has led. You have a lack of trust in the political directorate. The average Dominican does not believe the political directorate. Okay? They are fearful of their jobs. We have a down economy. We have thrown out of any sort of inclusivity, or inclusion rather, the folks who have capacity to help the country. We believe we can do it with foreign aid, or depending on countries like China. Chinese build China. Germans build Germany. It is Dominicans who are going to build Dominica. And that is what we're trying to do with the Academy of Arts and Sciences and bringing all people back to build. I built my home. Irvin built his home. We're trying to get Dominicans to come back and build Dominica, but they run you away. They run away the fruit of the loom. That's what we are. And so I fully endorse what you have said, Pastor Rodney, which is akin to what Irvin and I have tried to do with Poncasse Press. It's an education mission. We must never tire of encouraging people to read. Irvin made a very interesting point about the library. Why can't they find $13 million for the Creole Festival, which all it leaves you with is a hangover? There's zero, as far as I'm concerned. We may get a little bump because we buy some ice cream and popcorn and so on, but what is the long-term beneficial value of the Creole Festival? As far as I'm concerned, zero. Have we built a documentary industry on Creole culture? Have we had an expo on agriculture and industry in a Creole fashion? Have we had a book on Creole cuisine or a program that's running that's earning money on Creole cuisine? Do we have a Creole wear industry that we can sell when people come? All you have is 3 or 4 days of bacchanal and a high and a hangover, and that's it. I mean, I'll be blunt with you. There are people who, like Waddix and others who may not like what I'm saying, but I'm saying we have to move away from frivolity to industry. We have to move away from being high and dry to being prosperous, productive, and wise in the use of our funds. We cannot be talking about any sort of jump up and so on when we do not have a national library. You have 2 airports, a third being built, but you do not have a national library. Are you a serious country? And so education is what will allow us to understand our Constitution. Education is what will allow us to understand what rule of law means. Education is what will have us understand what it means to be a civil servant. A civil servant is someone who is engaged in ensuring that they work not in the partisan interest, but in the public interest. You're not working for a party, you're working for your country. The country comes first, not the party. And so when we meet on even nights like this, I hope that there are those who will listen to us, who will be encouraged to read, who will be encouraged to mentor a young person, who will be encouraged to join a PTA, who will be encouraged to start a student organization like Randy and I were part of it back in our days in school when there were student governments, who will be encouraged to start a youth group, who will be encouraged to join a non-governmental organization to build up and to clean up their community, because the duty is ours and we must be so duty bound.
Thanks, Gabe. Irving, your additional thoughts on all of this? I mean, in terms of what Randy was, talking about, and then what Gabe has just spoken about a while ago.
Well, in my view, anything which takes away your productivity, anything which in some fashion, especially through abuse, which will take away whatever abilities or skills or talents that you have, is something to be avoided. It's as simple as that. Personally, that's how I look at it. The fact of the matter is that to the extent that you don't believe in reincarnation, to the extent that you believe that life is a gift, to the extent that you've been imbued with certain talents, whether from a biblical perspective or otherwise, that you have an obligation, in my respectful view, to make as much of the talents that you have been given. And to understand that success is not necessarily or limited to your personal achievements, scholastic, business, or otherwise, but the extent to which you uplift others as you march on to make take full example, but to take full advantage of what you've been given. That, in my view, is the very essence of life. It's the essence of what Dominica should be. We've been blessed with verdancy. We've been blessed with a beautiful landscape, which is very attractive, which we're blessed with an indomitable spirit, a resilience which is unprecedented. We should be reinforced by our history. And the question is, are we? We should be blessed with all these things so that we will be able to double or triple our efforts to build our country. Just a brief comment on one thing we haven't talked about. Garbage. Garbage. Last time I was there, we counted 9 separate heaps of garbage in Girodel, the flower village of Dominica. In every village, mountains of garbage. Garbage. Where is our sense of pride? Our sense of dignity? The extent to which we cherish the landscape? Huh? Even forgetting about leptospirosis and all these debilitating type of diseases and so on. Where is our sense of preserving our little space, our neighborhood? Huh? Where is it? It's not there. It's not on the priority list. The priority list is to look for a way to surreptitiously purchase properties with the net proceeds of sale of passports, so that nobody knows, so that there will be houses of dark secrets littering Drozo, creating a society of have and have-nots, who who do have, a dog-eat-dog mentality, a selfishness we've never seen in our history. Is that the success that we crave? Is that what it is all about, for God's sakes? Huh? Is that what we aim to, what we aspire to? So we can drive around with our dark tinted things and drink our double black, or what, Hennessy, whatever the hell is it? I don't know. Huh? Is that the symbols of success? Is that what we're embracing as a community? Where is the spirit of Edward Oliver Leblanc, who took time off to write poetry, talking about Dominicans, talking about what the Dominican nation should be, what the Dominican personality should be? Huh? Writing a poem, Nom Noir, Black Men. A leader, not talking about how many houses he's going to buy or lands, and even if he bought 10 houses, at least he worked for it though. But not talking about thrift, industry, enterprise, but talking about selling the tokens of citizenship or sovereignty to the highest bidder. The only thing they didn't sell, Mr. G's parrots, Gasso.
But they didn't sell parrots? Oh, I see. Well, it's about time for closing remarks. We get in trouble. We get to the point where we need to wind up. Pastor Rodney, your closing remarks.
Well, thanks very much, Mr. G, for inviting me to the program tonight. I'm really happy to have been in the company of my old grammar school friend, Gebu, and the illustrious Irvin Andre, and yourself, with Lambe on the console. I'm very happy to have been part of this conversation. And I really would employ us to continue educating, doing our best to educate the people. Although sometimes when we're on those programs, we sometimes speak to the choir, but we're hoping that the choir will recruit, some of the voices who will come to listen to the new songs, and we'll educate them one at a time, and we'll be able to change the nation one family at a time, one community at a time, and one nation at a time. I am comfortable that the large majority of Dominicans are now thinking differently. Even if they're quiet, they are thinking differently. And I am sure that the nation will see a change in that type of governance sometime very soon. Thank you again for having me, and good night to all of you.
Thanks a lot, Pastor Rodney. And incidentally, I was in Skinner House the Dominican Grammar School. I was the captain of cricket in my day. I was a captain of soccer and the vice captain of athletics. And Dr. Clayton Shillingford was my sports master.
Oh,
And
wow.
right? And if you see you made a mistake and dribble too much on the soccer field, you'll run behind you, make 2 laps around you and throw it down. That is the kind of discipline that we had in those days at the Dominican Grammar School.
I am sure. Ozzy Sovereign was my sports master. My first principal was oh God, I can't remember the gentleman's.
It would have been either Alfred Levy or Mr. Alexander.
Mr. Alexander, that's right. Mr.
There's
Alexander.
an interview I did with him on YouTube, so you can put
I'll check
Donkey
it
Down
out.
School Alexander. You'll enjoy it.
I met him some time ago in Tampa, but I was part of the Jupini House.
Jupini.
And yeah, I was one of those who was a long distance runner. That's why I have that kind of laddie why.
Okay. I get it now.
Thanks.
So, Gabriel, your closing remarks?
I hope, first of all, it's a high honor and privilege. And my father taught us the principle that half a loaf is better than none. What if there was no not Kyrie FM, no Q95? What if all we had was Kyrie FM and DBS? So sometimes, we underestimate the importance of bravery, of sticking to it. A few years ago, we gave an award to Dr. Andrew Young. He was the last surviving person from the trio of Andrew Young, Ralph Abernathy, and Dr. King. And Sam had met him in the 70s when he was doing biochemistry in Georgia. I'd never met him, so I tried to go up to him, and he left the platform, and he was going out. I followed him. He was going out into the men's room where men go to do what they want to do, either number one or number two. And since he was doing the one that men do standing up, I tried to do the same thing so I could engage him in conversation. And he said to me, he thanked the Institute of Caribbean Studies for giving him the award. And he said 3 things, I'll never forget. He said that Dr. King from 1956 went to Jamaica every year and wrote some of his best speeches in Jamaica. Number 2, he said the first time he saw a black person selling tickets behind a counter was in Jamaica. In the United States, it was just porters, sky caps. And number 3, he said the March on Washington, the National Baptist Convention, the black churches, they did not support them. They said they were revolutionaries. They were communists. They were troublemakers, that they got more support from the Jews and the trade unions than the black church. But after the famous March on Washington and the famous I Have a Dream speech, everybody and his mother and his brother wanted to say, I was there too. So the moral of the story, basically, that he really outlined that night is we have to stick to it. When we know that we're doing the right thing, when we know that we are not self-serving, when we know that we're not being just, blatant partisans trying to push a political agenda for some party of our liking as opposed to another, when we know that we are serving the country's best interest, when we know that we're trying to educate our young, when we know that we're trying to serve the best values of those parents we had and the country we knew, when we know those things, when we're imbued with that spirit of victory and of decency, yes, indeed, as Dr. King once said, we shall overcome.
Very true. Very true, Dr. Andrew. The final word?
Yeah. Well, let me thank Pastor Rodney and Gebu for the powerful presentations this evening. They are always inspiring, and sometimes I have to search for words just to keep up with them. But let me say, Mr. G, I'm not trying to take you down, but you're not the only one who can boast about your athletic prowess. I can tell you that at one point I was the lime and spoon champion of the grammar school. So quite frankly, I can hold my own in that regard.
True.
But on a more serious note, I certainly am not as versed in biblical studies and so on as Pastor Randy. But what if there was no story about David and Goliath? What if there was no story about Dominicans, small island Dominicans, who have gone out and succeeded spectacularly, whether in industry, whether in academics, whether in business and so on? What is if there was not, for example, an AC Shillingford in the 20s who had an agro facility and who had the vision and fortitude of having branches in Trinidad and in Grenada at a time when, quite frankly, business persons in Trinidad and Grenada did not have a similar vision to have extensions of their businesses in Dominica. What if we did not have those pioneers? Then we could have had a legitimate excuse. Then we could say, quite frankly, why should we aspire to greatness when there are no examples in our past of such greatness? But there is. There is Gebu of more recent vintage, let's put it that way. There are others, whether in England, whether in the United States, whether in the islands, for God's sakes, in universities all over. They are motivated by one singular thought, that within themselves lie the ingredients for tremendous success and self-pride and worth. And it is in that context that we have to look at Dominica and where we are at now. We are not doomed or destined to be hewers of wood and drawers of water. On the contrary, we are not doomed to be peddlers of the symbols of our independence, of our nationhood. We are beyond that. Foreigners should not say, Dominica got some saga in your passport. You can vanchui. No, we have to have a much higher conception of ourselves. Those folk, those unscrupulous folk out there have to know that we stand for something. You cannot depend on us to give you what we have to the detriment of our own. That is not the reputation that we need. So that is what we must work to change. We have to change it. We will not give away our possessions for trinkets. That was the very essence of colonialism. You give them a few gaudy items and they give you their land, for God's sakes. They sell your bananas at a pittance. Well, they buy your bananas from you at a pittance and sell it at a handsome profit. No, we have to make our assets and resources work for us as a people. And if we don't do that, quite frankly, we'll lose that heritage, that rich and cherished heritage, not for a mess of pottage, but for nothing. So, it's on that note that I take my leave. But as I said, I'm always the eternal optimist. And as long as there are voices who, despite of the repercussions of speaking out loudly, who continue to sound the alarm, who continue to stimulate, who continue to inspire others, there is hope. And there will be hope. And Q95 must take a bow, because you have played your part in the scheme of things which give us hope as a community. So I thank you, and I thank your listeners for staying up so late. It's 10:11, and the night draweth to an end. Thank you very much.
And thanks a lot, Irving, and thank you, Gabe, and thank you, Pastor Rodney and Lambie and Show. And I also want to reach out and thank all the folks who were with us on the radio and on Facebook and YouTube. Thank you so much. We hope that we've left a little bit of, maybe some little tiny bit of knowledge with you that you could take with you. And as Pastor Rodney says, to improve the mindset so that we can all take responsibility for where we are and where we want to get to and take our island to. So thank you so much, gentlemen. And let me just wish everybody a very pleasant good night. Good night, Dr. Andre. Good night, Gabe.
Good night, Irving. Good night, Mr. J. Good night, Brother Lambie. And Pastor Rodney.
Good night, everybody on YouTube and Facebook and on the radio. Take care, everybody. Till next time.
God bless you. Bye-bye.
The Global View on Q, the big station. Insights into where the people of Dominica and the Caribbean came from. Understanding our past. Embracing our present. charting the way forward into our future. Together, eliminating poverty, embracing justice, peace, and togetherness.